All right, let's talk about Enrico Fermi. He wasn't just a physicist, he was a guy who literally changed the world. We're going to dive into the story of the man who redefined science and really the entire course of human history.
So get this. People called him the architect of the nuclear age. And even crazier, the last person who knew all of physics. I mean, think about that for a second. That's not just a compliment, right? His peers genuinely believed he was the last person to truly get everything in physics, from the big brainy theories down to actually building the experiments.
And that's really the key to what made him so special. You see, most physicists back then were either theorists, the thinkers, or experimentalists, the builders. Fermi, he was both, a total double threat. He could come up with these incredible, out-there ideas and then walk into the lab and actually build the contraption to prove he was right. That was almost unheard of.
So who was this guy? Who was the man who cracked the atom wide open and pushed us into a brand new age? Well, that's what we're here to find out. We're going to follow his story, from being this brilliant kid in Italy to becoming the person who, for better or worse, changed everything.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. We're heading to Rome, where it became clear very, very early on that Enrico Fermi was, well, different. Just how different? Well, check this out. For his university entrance exam, when he was just 17, he wrote an essay on the physics of a vibrating rod. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. He used such advanced math that the examiner was completely blown away. The guy basically said, yep, this kid's going to be an outstanding physicist. Talk about making a first impression.
And it didn't take long. By his mid-20s, he's already a professor, leading his own team of brilliant young physicists in Rome. And he was so confident, so sure of his calculations, that they gave him a nickname, get this, the Pope. Why? Because when Fermi said something about physics, it was treated like gospel. He was just that good. And you know what? He absolutely earned that title. In just a few years, he develops the math that defines a whole class of particles. We call them fermions now. You know, the stuff that makes up pretty much all matter. Then, he comes up with a theory for beta decay that requires a brand new particle, the neutrino. But the big one, the real game changer, he figures out that slow neutrons are way better at starting nuclear reactions. And that discovery, well, that's the one that would change the world forever.
But right when he's at the absolute peak of his scientific career, everything is about to change. His personal life and the entire world were heading for a very, very dark turn.
1938. You got to remember that year. It was a turning point for Fermi, and honestly, for all of us.
So, on the one hand, he gets the call. He's won the Nobel Prize in physics, the absolute pinnacle of science, an amazing moment. But on the other hand, back home in Italy, Mussolini's government passes these horrible racial laws, and Fermi's wife, Laura, she was Jewish. Suddenly, his family was in incredible danger. The stakes just went from 0 to 100.
So what does he do? He uses the Nobel Prize ceremony as a cover. It wasn't just a trip to pick up a medal, it was their ticket out. After the ceremony in Stockholm, he and his family never went back to Italy. They got on a boat and sailed straight for America.
And so the Italian navigator, as he'd later be called, arrives in the New World. And this is where the next chapter of his story begins, a chapter that would take him and all of us right into the nuclear age.
Now, you might be picturing some futuristic, top-secret lab for what comes next. But no, the location for one of the most important experiments in human history was a squash court. Yeah, literally a squash court underneath the bleachers of a football stadium in Chicago. This is where they built the world's very first artificial nuclear reactor.
And the whole thing was pure Fermi. He oversaw the construction of this massive pile of uranium and graphite bricks. Everything was calculated down to the last detail. And then, on December 2nd, 1942, the moment of truth. They slowly pull out the control rods, and it works. The pile goes critical. For the very first time, human beings created and controlled a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. The genie was officially out of the bottle.
So how do you announce something that big? With a coded message, of course. A phone call was made with a simple phrase. The Italian navigator has just landed in the New World. The natives were friendly. The navigator was Fermi, and he had just discovered a new continent of power for humanity.
And with that success, Fermi became a central figure in the Manhattan Project. This is where his legacy gets really, really complicated.
a story of incredible scientific achievement, but also of a heavy, heavy burden.
I love this story. So they're at the Trinity tests, the first atomic bomb explosion. You've got all this fancy equipment everywhere to measure the blast. And what does Fermi do? He just tears up a piece of paper into little bits. When the shockwave hits, he drops them and watches how far they flutter. And from just watching bits of paper in the wind, he calculates the bomb's yield. And guess what? His simple on-the-spot calculation was incredibly close to the official measurement. That was just how his brain worked.
His life after the war really shows you who he was. I mean, he was crucial to making the atomic bomb happen, no question. But then he argued against building the hydrogen bomb, the H-bomb, saying it was morally wrong. He also defended his friend and colleague Robert Oppenheimer when he was under attack. And all the while, his mind was still reaching for the biggest questions out there.
Which leads to maybe his most famous question, something we now call the Fermi paradox. He was just chatting with colleagues one day, and he applied his classic simple logic. He thought, look, the universe is gigantic. There have to be tons of planets, so there should be tons of alien civilizations, right? The math says so. So he just asked, where is everybody? If the universe should be full of life, why is it so quiet? It's a simple question that we still have no answer for.
But he never forgot what he'd helped create here on Earth. I think this quote from him says it all. He said, "What we all have to hope for is that man will soon grow up enough to make good use of the incredible powers he's gaining over nature." It's a hope, but you can also hear the worry in it, can't you? The fear that maybe our power has outpaced our wisdom.
Enrico Fermi died of cancer when he was only 53. It's very likely that his own work, the radiation he studied so closely, is what killed him. He left behind a completely different world, a world with the power to destroy itself. He was the architect of this new age, and he left the rest of us, well, he left us to figure out what to do with it.